Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being with you. I'm Ezra Calvert, and on behalf of TTRA, welcome. Just a couple housekeeping notes. We are going to use the chat feature as usual. And we have two guests with us today, David and Aaron from Destination Analysts. They have been tracking what consumers are up to, what their perception and sentiment are about, and data and findings have just been phenomenal. These have been going on a weekly basis, and today they prepared a stellar presentation for you guys. I hope you find them as interesting I have. Just a background for you on Aaron and David. Aaron is the president and CEO of Destination Analysts. Prior to that, she was with San Francisco Tourism Office, so she knows the DMO business very well. Per David, he is the head of, he's the director of digital analytics and data security at Destination Analysts. He is an ex-lawyer, that's what I call him. He's very knowledgeable in the legal space, especially when it comes to data privacy and security. So let's welcome them, and we are looking forward to hearing from them today. David, Aaron, and Aaron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ezra. Hello, everyone from San Francisco. I'm a proud tourism researcher and proud TTRA board member.
And thank you so
David,
much
I think, is our tourism research community. Go ahead, David.
No, just thank you so much for having us. I'm proud to be here as as Ezra said, ex-lawyer, although I don't think I ever stopped being a lawyer. But I am a resident bow tie expert, so I bring that to the research as well.
Yes, and I can attest, having worked with David for 7 years, that he has never stopped being a lawyer. For those of you we haven't met yet or unfamiliar with us, Destination Analysts is a full-service market research firm that collects and analyzes data and feedback to provide a breadth of insights into your customers, audiences, brands, and marketing performance to increase the positive impact of tourism. So being part of the consumer spending-based economy, I'm going to start out today with what's essential to travel's recovery. And that's an update on how travelers are thinking, feeling, and behaving in the period of COVID-19. I know a lot of you are from outside the United States. Our data is unfortunately all based on American travelers, but I think that will give you some insight into how others in the world may be feeling as well. And this is from our Coronavirus Travel Sentiment Index study. Then David is going to start the discussion on research that's needed now to plan for what's next by covering what we and our clients are seeing as critical to tourism's recovery. So we'll get started here. Each week since March 15th, we've surveyed 1,200 travelers from each of the 4 major regions of the United States. The data is weighted and we have a confidence interval of ±2.8%. What I'll be sharing today comes from data collected May 15th through 17th. And this research is very unique right now in that it's independently produced by us. It's not sponsored, conducted, or influenced by any advertising or marketing agency. It's solely produced to provide our travel industry colleagues with unbiased information to base their decisions. So this is our 10th week of having this study. We wish you all continued strength and hope you wish it back to us. So to provide context to these findings, when this survey was fielded, this last survey was fielded just a few days ago, Americans were seeing, hearing, and talking about the US death toll reaching 100,000 by the end of the month, the patchwork of reopenings within and across states in the country, and the potential impact of that, how and when we may safely gather again, and the many, many opinions on wearing face masks. As we look to learn about travel's performance in this reality, the most important question we can ask and very predictive indicator is how are we feeling right now? We've explored this in a number of different ways in this research, but as America gradually reopened this week, we look specifically at shelter in place and its impact on the American mood. So for reference, 82% of American travelers report living in a place that is or was under shelter in place orders. When asked to reflect on that experience, over 60% of traveling Americans feel that sheltering in place went well for them. Just under 1 in 10 said that being under SIP went poorly for them. In terms of impacts on familial bonds, SIP mandates appear to have helped more than they hurt. 38.6% said the experience helped them grow closer as a family. And our ongoing quarterly The State of the American Traveler Study research has in recent years really illuminated the personal emotional benefits that Americans and others feel travel provides them. And it looks like shelter in place underscored that. So nearly 60% of travelers living under shelter in place orders report that they think traveling together after the coronavirus pandemic would be good for their family. And as many Americans head back or plan to head back to work environments, we also wanted to look at what kind of trust they felt in their coworkers to behave in ways that kept it safe, the work environment safe from COVID-19. So most employed American travelers have at least some faith in their coworkers when it comes to protecting them from the spread of the virus. 80.6% of travelers said they have some level of trust that their coworkers will behave in a way that protects their health. I think this and other findings make it appear that American travelers are demonstrating increased comfort in spite of their concerns surrounding COVID-19. Looking at their personal concerns about the virus, both financially and personally, their personal concerns about contracting the virus and its impact on their finances and the national economy all remain constant over the last 2 weeks. Concerns that the severity of the pandemic will get worse in the United States in the next month declined this week. The proportion comfortable going out to engage in activities in their own community is at a 9-week high. And when it comes to travel activities, those involving a lot of people or potential close contact with others, those continue to be seen as the relatively least safe activities, likely for a good reason. What you're looking at on this chart is the proportion of travelers rating each activity as somewhat unsafe or very unsafe. And these perceptions about nearness to people can be seen in how unsafe some of the newer activities we started tracking this week are rated, like inner city bus and train travel and casinos. Although keep in mind, this is across all American travelers and across all regions of the US. Anyway, increasing numbers of Americans are feeling it's safer to go shopping, visit friends and relatives, take a road trip, and engage in non-team outdoor recreational activities. In fact, traveler ratings of the safety of all the travel activities that we're tracking improved again this week. So if we look at this over time, we see our baseline the week of March 15th, and then we'll see the height of fear around the week of April 12th. And now this week, it's near levels we saw 10 weeks ago. And for the 6th week in a row, the proportion of Americans saying they're done traveling until the coronavirus situation blows over in their mind has decreased, nearing the level that it was March 15th. Excitement to take a getaway in the next month increased again this week. And travelers' interest in learning about travel experiences and destinations also increased again this week to 44.3% from 42.6%. And in looking at what travelers say they're going to avoid after the coronavirus situation, they most commonly continue to say crowded destinations. And about a quarter of American travelers remain committed to avoiding travel until the coronavirus situation has more definitively passed. So with them saying they're out of the game for now, as we all know as tourism researchers, that's a lot of potential economic impact that's not being generated. So I wanted to look more closely at who these people are. And those that are going to avoid travel until more progress is made against coronavirus, they have much higher levels of concern about contracting the virus or their friends and family contracting the virus. They skew female, and they are more likely to have graduate degrees. But that got you down. Just remind yourself about this wonderful generation, the millennials. Time Magazine refers to them as the generation of me, me, me. I've always personally referred to them as the generation of yes, because the degree to which the world was open to them, to access, to explore, and how that really shapes them as the prolific travelers that they are at a young age. And Time Magazine also said that they would save us all. And for the travel industry, I think that they just might fulfill that promise. So they show clear indicators of really wanting to do the right thing around the virus, but they are feeling a greater sense of safety in the world right now relative to other generations, and that's making them more open to travel. Their levels of excitement to travel within the next month and interest about learning about travel destinations are notably higher than baby boomers. And they can be particularly motivated to travel by price cuts and discounts right now, and that's something that travel providers can readily put in front of them. So in summary, the shelter-in-place experience appears to have worked out fairly well for most travelers, improving many families' sense of togetherness and underscoring the benefits of travel. American travelers are feeling more comfortable and gradually safer, and enthusiasm for getting back to travel continues to improve. And younger travelers will likely be key to the initial stage of the industry's recovery. And on the topic of the travel industry recovery, a question that is also vital to it is, are we ready to attend conferences and conventions again? The perceived safety of conferences and conventions does remain depressed, but it's improved since the lows that we recorded in the first half of April. And the percent of conference and convention travelers saying they're avoiding these events until the coronavirus situation is resolved is at a 9-week low. And when it comes to the biggest concern right now, health and safety, 2/3 of conference and convention travelers say they would have at least some level of trust that the host organization of their meeting would look out for and protect their health. However, when these travelers who attend conferences and conventions were asked about their confidence in their fellow meeting attendees to conduct themselves appropriately, a lower 60.7% said that they had some level of trust. So in summary, American travelers are opening back up to attending conferences and conventions. There's tentative trust in the event producers to protect their health, but the meetings industry may face a bigger challenge in developing trust about the attendees at those events. Let's now look at what Americans are reporting about their very next leisure trip. Americans are definitely planning travel. This chart is showing you the percent of Americans reporting they have at least a tentative trip planned in each month for the rest of the year. In total, 64.1% of American travelers have at least one trip planned for the remainder of 2020. And we asked this group a series of questions about their very next leisure trip. 7 in 10 of them have taken some action towards this trip, including talking to friends and relatives about it, researching things to see and do, even making hotel and lodging reservations. 37.3% of these trips will be vacations and 17.1% weekend getaways. Just over 1 in 4 travelers will spend their next leisure trip expressly for the purpose of visiting friends and relatives. The majority of travelers say their trips are developed in their minds, meaning they have a strong idea of where they will go on this trip and when it will happen. And 69.9% say they know exactly, or at least have a good idea of where they will go. They are primarily staying domestic for this trip. Only about 16% of these first leisure trips will include travel outside the United States. And the distance that travelers are planning to go on their next leisure trip may surprise many in the industry. So for example, 1 in 4 say they're going to travel more than 1,000 miles from home on their trip. And the mean distance is 511 miles. But note that 40% reported distance under 250 miles. Last night, I saw a news story about the opening of Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming here in the United States, and the number of out-of-state license plates, including many from the east coast of the United States, were reported. So I think it's interesting that, yes, people are perhaps willing to go a lot further than we initially thought. Okay, so beach destinations and resorts look likely to see a strong proportion of first trip post-pandemic travelers. So almost 1/3 of Americans say they're going to go to that type of destination on that first trip. But looking at mountains, deserts, small towns, villages, rural areas, national states, and local parks, 57.3% said their destination would be one of those. Health and safety information is going to be critical to these travelers, and distribution of that type of information is needed at the destination level. 3/4 of travelers say they will research how the destination and their businesses are managing the coronavirus situation before they leave on their trip. And a majority say they're going to carry hand sanitizer, follow social distancing guidelines, avoid crowds, and wear a face mask on their trip. One of the things that we're going to be looking into once people start traveling it is if they do actually follow through on these things they say they're going to. So just to look more in detail at these most marketable travelers, the ones going on vacations and weekend getaways, over half are still not completely decided on where they will go and could be potentially influenced through marketing. 42% say they're going to travel in their personal car, goes 539 miles on average. Compared to the other types of trips, they're more likely to eat in restaurants and stay in a hotel. 44% say they're going to visit a park, and safety information is even more important to them. So in summary, 2/3 of American travelers have at least one trip tentatively planned for 2020. Most of these trips are developed to some degree, but there's room to influence trip decisions. Trip thresholds may be further than we initially anticipated, and safety is paramount to planning. Won't be far from travelers' minds both before and during their trip, making the availability of destination level information really important. And speaking of importance of safety information, let's look at how much American travelers trust the travel industry right now. As we've demonstrated from our research findings repeatedly over the last 10 weeks, staying safe from infection is what travelers are most, the American travelers are most aligned in prioritizing. Last week, I had the honor of presenting this research to the CEOs of the major travel providers, and there was a piece of really me. The CEO of one of the world's largest hotel chains said this to his fellow CEOs: travelers need to feel safe in every aspect of their journey. And this is a profound demonstration of the understanding he has that the travel industry has to work together and really hard in making consumers feel safe in their decision to travel. Right now, trust in travel-related businesses may be relatively muted. Only 12.7% of Americans report they have a great deal of trust that travel-related businesses will look out for their health while traveling. And similarly, confidence that travel-related businesses can safely be reopened is not particularly high at the moment. Only 12% say they are very confident that these businesses can now open safely. And American travelers, despite wanting to travel themselves, they largely still don't want or don't feel ready for visitors in their own community, although this is at a 4-week low. And rural residents are least comfortable with tourists presently. And when travelers showing a desire for the type of tourism assets that we typically associate with rural, I think some tensions may arise if these visitors don't behave themselves. And then looking at face masks, right now, a strong majority of American travelers do feel that people should wear face masks when they're out in public in the current environment. So in summary, travel businesses should not assume their guests are entirely trusting of them to take care of their health right now and should take extra measures to earn that trust. Most travelers are not yet convinced the industry can safely reopen. Rural residents are least comfortable with tourists, setting up some potential tension if there's increased visitor volume and lack of hygienic behavior. You can find the latest from our travel marketing potential influence index on our website, or David, I know, welcomes emails directly. He's the one that does all that work on that. But just so you know, the index shows improvement in travel readiness this week. We, of course, have a long journey back to get to pre-COVID-19 levels. And there's an unevenness in travel readiness, making understanding your high potential traveling audiences even more critical. All right, let's get into what's needed for what's next.
Awesome. So, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So, to the audience out there, Erin just walked us through the latest update from our coronavirus traveler sentiment index research. And that's really looking like under a microscope, what are travelers feeling right now about the situation? The greater discussion that I want to start with you all is looking at what research can best prepare destinations for the future after COVID-19. That's the discussion that we want to open up. And what I'm going to do now is walk you through a high-level overview of the research that our clients have currently found most helpful in looking forward. We, of course, want to open this up in terms of discussion and have questions on what research will best be beneficial for you. But I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we're seeing right now, in addition to following our weekly coronavirus traveler research. So first is industry benchmarks. One of the most asked questions that Erin and I are both getting right now is, how does what we're seeing, how does what we're tracking compare to pre-COVID times? And in some ways, that's a very difficult question to answer in a reliable, shaky, but thankfully our backward-looking data is actually quite significant. Our State of the American Traveler Study, which is the longest running tracking study of American leisure traveler sentiment, behavior, and motivations, we've been feeling that since 2006. Along with its sister study, the State of the International Traveler, which is an annual study that we've conducted to understand the perceptions and motivations of international visitors inbound into the US, using these as benchmarks. And both of these studies right now we are giving away for free, essentially, because we want to put out as much information out there as we can and help this industry in its looking forward. But yeah, it's going to be that much more important to understand how we compare to pre-COVID times. Our second biggest question that we've been asking is, how do I show the value of the work I'm doing right now? Because it's very difficult to see whether or not I'm making a difference. Is it worth my time to keep my website updated? Is it worth my time to keep my social content out there and my advertising? We have 3 different industry studies that we've made public in the last couple of years: our DMO social media and conversion and ROI study, our impact of DMO websites, and our study of the DMO visitor guide, to give you sort of industry level benchmarks that you can say, this is an average of what my website and my visitor guide are supposed to do in this time, because it's going forward going to be that much more important, we know, to be able to defend the work that you do and to show how important the work that you do is. Other research that we're doing currently right now for clients looking forward, number 1 is resident research. Resident sentiment has been in our dialogue in the last year a lot, and it's going to be that much more important right now with the rise of staycations, how your resident is actually interacting with your destination and driving your local economy, making those economic wheels churn. But also as destinations open back up and visitors start to return, understanding how your residents feel is going to be that much more important, and maybe different than how your residents felt pre-COVID-19. Visitor profiles. Visitors to your destination may change after the coronavirus. I know this seems like an obvious concept, but I want to make sure to take the time to say that again. The visitor to your destination may change in the future, and understanding how they engage with your destination and why they're visiting your destination, those reasons may change. As we've seen just in our coronavirus traveler sentiment study, the interest in visiting cities has dropped from what we saw in pre-COVID time. The interest in visiting beach destinations has risen, and that's just one example of how the opportunity there for your destination may change in terms of who your visitor is. Of course, it's important not just to understand the who and the why, but also the when and the where. We've been, for a number of destinations now, looking at visitor activity and analysis using geolocation data. Geolocation data, of course, doesn't allow us to talk directly to the visitor, but it does let us understand a little bit about when they visit, where they go in the destination. And so for those destinations where it is really just not safe or inaccessible to understand about who your visitor is, there are still ways that we can understand what visitors are doing and where they come from. Taking a step up from the visitor level data is your destination's brand. How travelers perceive and interact with your destination brand has always been critical to understanding why people visit. And because your visitor may change after COVID-19, the reasons that your visitor may change. The reasons that your visitor visits also may change in the future. So it's going to be really important, we feel, to be forward-looking on that. On that same topic, knowing who your key audience is to go after for conversion rates in terms of their psychographic and demographic profiles, that also may need to be updated looking forward. And not just that, but how to message to them. What messaging is going to be most resonating with those key travel audiences also may need to change. And in the near term, very specifically to include how you're handling the coronavirus situation, but in the long term, how your brand will evolve from this. And then finally, the profiles and intentions of your own audiences, the most loyal audiences that can help you gain important marketing insight that can be used to attract new visitors. This is the audience that should never ever be underappreciated, because they know you and love you more than anyone else, and learning from them is going to be that much more critical in the future. So that was my high-level overview of the different research that our clients are asking most about, and that we feel is going to be most helpful sort of going into the future. But we definitely want to ask the audience, what research do you want to see? What is going to be most helpful for you in the future? Whether that's a new question we can add to our weekly coronavirus sentiment tracking study, because we're happy to take question suggestions and new topics to explore, or whole new research projects that we can design. We want to be as helpful as we can to the industry going forward, because as Erin put it so perfectly, if we don't do this all together and work together in this, we're not going to be able to get to the other side.
David, thank you so much for that quick walkthrough about research priorities. I really believe that the pandemic is going to bring more opportunities for how we do tourism in a better way, perhaps in a more responsible way. It's unfortunate that we had to go through this unfortunate time, and the numbers are not going to look good for a while. And for a lot of destinations, it could be through or towards 2021. I love the fact that you brought up benchmarks. We gotta look at the past, and some of those benchmarkings are going to change along with the visitors that are coming to a destination. You brought up the resident perspective. I am in love with that perspective. We have been talking diligently in the industry, not only from the advocacy perspective, but also resident satisfaction, how destinations are doing the right things for the people who live, work, and invest in an area. Any takeaways from the resident perspective that you are seeing destinations are doing differently at the moment, or any prospects that destinations are looking into spinning the research sentiment and make that data more agile, more frequent?
I think our TTRA community is familiar with the resident research of pre-COVID-19, where it was really used from an advocacy perspective to take a pulse on that. The residents understood tourism and its value and how they can improve that. And what we're seeing now is that's still obviously critical, but a newer thing that's become important is with the recovery being led, or the idea that the recovery is going to be led by locals first, and the staycation and gradually going, more and more out from their house, that people want to ask their residents about what their intentions are with local travel. And I know that type of insight has been really helpful in developing lots of different strategies, not even just from a marketing, but from a communication, and working, with businesses and aggregating all that type of information to push out.
Thank you,
And just
Erin.
to add to that, we have a couple sort of large urban city destination clients who right now are looking at their local community and not just for how comfortable they are getting out, but asking the marketing question to their locals: what will get you to spend a hotel night, spend a night in a hotel room in your own city without leaving? For those destinations that are opening up, that are starting to have businesses open, it's how can we get the economic wheels turning right now? And that's what our just a couple of our clients are doing, that are opening up right now and looking at.
So on the chat feature, if individuals ask about the reports and they wanted to have their hands on the things that you have shared with us, and we are going to make the presentation available to everyone, by the way. But I shared your website address so that if anybody wants to go in and dive into those reports, especially from a benchmarking perspective, it's with everyone. So I wanted to make sure that Erin and David are aware of it. Everybody wants to dive into the data, especially from a benchmarking perspective. So changing the gears a little bit, I'm going to move into the first question that we got from John. He's asking, we read stories about political divides regarding safety behaviors in general. Do you have any indications this will spill over to travel behaviors and propensities?
Yes. We have not asked political party affiliation in the last 4 weeks or so, but we did ask it for a while. And those that identify as Republican in the United States tended to be much more optimistic about the coronavirus situation in terms of their personal concerns about it and their openness to travel. And I can't imagine that that's not going to impact their travel behavior and propensities, just given that their optimism about the situation is stronger. I do want to take the opportunity to warn our fellow travel and tourism community that it's, very, everyone is under a high amount of stress. And I'll just share that things have gotten, data that I've published that we've published has gotten construed as somehow having a political agenda. And I just share that with you for yourselves to just be safe or think about how things might get misinterpreted in this just highly stressful, very overly politicized environment right now. I've been kind of surprised that people think something at travel statistic is somehow political, but that's just the times we're in.
Erin, I was surprised, and we have seen this in other reports elsewhere too. Everything triangulates. The angst and anxiety is there. That's the number one concern. But there's also that concern that was so vivid in the recent research in the last 2 weeks, is that opening up tourism again, that concern. What can businesses or even DMOs can do to at least minimize that angst or anxiety? Anything that you have seen creative? I love the fact that you quoted that one travel executive who said, we just have consumers have the right to travel safely in every aspect of that journey. And I believe right now, one catalyst that we have seen is that journey is during trip planning as well. And normally as destinations, we didn't speak about safety because we didn't need to. Now we gotta go and talk about that. Anything that you are seeing in the industry that's more creative, purposeful, meaningful from a messaging perspective.
Yes, there's a Facebook group, if some of you are interested and asked to join. It's a COVID-19 Tourism Resources Group, and it's one of those times where you just feel so fortunate to be part of this industry, because there's a lot of creativity in communicating that safety message. And the bigger and most important thing is so that destinations are communicating safety, that we've shown, or the research has shown, that it's just so important to people and they need it on that destination level. I mean, in terms of what travelers are saying they want to see is common business practices. The employee health screening does come up, but mainly it's around that cleaning activity is visible and that it's well explained and publicized, so that transparency. So we have a number, we've asked this a lot, and we can, it's all on our website too. We've asked questions about what the traveling consumers want exactly from hotels, restaurants, commercial public spaces like theme parks, the types of the protocols and behaviors they want to see from those businesses. And I think it's good to take it seriously that that type of information is wanted right now. And I will say also, Ezra, in my almost 20 years studying DMOs, I've never seen the level of trust put in them that we're seeing right now. We've asked questions about the resources that American travelers are going to trust in their travel planning right now. And state tourism offices and the local DMOs are extremely high, right under like their own personal networks. So the looking to official resources.
I love that, Erin.
Yeah,
what percentage are you seeing right now in terms of trust level? Do you recall?
Let me pull it up. I think that for local DMO and state tourism office, it was on the scale, it was above 40% saying they had higher degrees of trust in those, and I think it was second and third underneath
health
friends
officials.
and family.
Friends and family. And this also goes along with the question that Gail has brought up. How will the bigger theme parks like Walt Disney World protect people? Going back to safety and health sanitation practices, making it visible. I love the fact that you mentioned that, Erin. It needs to be visible. I think that takes away some of the uncertainty, and some of the instructions need to be clear. The protocols, as long as that is visible and explained to the customer in some ways, I think it helps.
Exactly.
Early on, when some of the businesses started opening, I was diligently checking what they were doing. They were putting these protocols that were 20, 30 pages. It's a lot to digest. I think it's good from a functional perspective, but there's no way a person can keep up with that kind of information for everything that they're gonna do. It's just a lot of anxiety. I know California, you guys are in San Francisco, still at lockdown, stay home, sheltering. How are businesses preparing there? Because part of Disney is there in San Francisco, lots of big hoteliers. Any conversations locally that's happening with, from the protection perspective?
Well, I think everyone was really excited that Shanghai Disney opened, I think, a week and a half ago. So I know people are looking to that as for guidance, and I think that was at 30% capacity and like lots of social distancing happening. I did see in the news today that Disney World in Florida did cancel out reservations for that first week of June, so it doesn't look like they're quite ready yet. Over here in California, our governor has relaxed a bit the qualifications for reopening. So we are seeing reopening right now. But David and I had a panel of restaurateurs on our webinar, our weekly webinar, let's see, a week ago or so. And they were really, I mean, they have to rethink their entire business model with social distancing, like on the industry level. So that'll be, I mean, you mentioned retail, Ezra, but restaurants too, how they can make money with what they currently have when they have to rethink their business model and their space. And I will say that the restaurants really, really wanted the DMO's help, not for marketing like we've been trained to think, but for communication and advocacy. So they were really looking for help on, what kind of guidelines should we say that we're following, and will you please communicate that our destination is safe, that you can eat in the restaurants here, and please help us with City Hall recognizing that restaurants are part of the greater tourism and hospitality industry and they need help.
And I'm going to jump into John's question because he's still asking about some of these safety and safety behaviors. And his response is, my concern about politics was actually not partisan, but rather about possibilities that initial travelers could be inclined to less safe behaviors. Masks are for sissies or some such, leading to more tensions with residents as tourism reopens.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So yeah, John, I think, and I was trying to be in that way to say that may happen because there are people that feel that they feel safer, so they may not feel like it's necessary to wear a mask.
You know, but just from our tracking study and research that we've done so far, we know that the majority of residents are still uncomfortable with new people coming in from out of town, and getting your residents on the same page of, you know, we're going to be reopening our destination and we're going to be requiring that everyone do it safely. We see that in our study, the majority of Americans, partisan or not, the majority of Americans agree that you should be wearing a mask when you go out in public, and they agree that they will be wearing a mask on their next leisure trip. So we're hoping it's not as large as the media would make it out to be, that there's this anti-mask sentiment. But yeah, it's going to be really important to openly communicate, not just with your visitors on what you expect from them as they visit, but to your residents that we're going to do everything we can to keep the destination safe in the reopening.
I got one more question about safety, and then I'm going to move to Wendy's question. This question is from Aditya, and it says, luxury hotels, restaurants, airlines, and package tour operators can follow the COVID-19 hygiene protocol, but do cases remain same for independent travelers, hippies, budget accommodations, and restaurants? So we're really looking into some way of standardization protocol.
I mean, the first.
Yeah, I think on the. Go ahead, David.
The first step is, of course, going to be what the official health organizations say are the rules that everyone needs to follow, right? That's going to be the baseline. If the health organizations say that you know, you have to be wearing a mask or your temperature has to get checked before you get on the plane, that's what everyone's going to do as a baseline. But the opportunity here we see for the DMOs is to be able to say our restaurants and our shops and our hotels are going above that, and this is what our destination is doing. This is how much more than the baseline for the official health recommendations that we're following. Yes, it is. You're right that the luxury hotels, the luxury restaurants, the airlines, they're going to have a lot more capital in terms of being able to implement higher levels of protocol. But I think this is also an opportunity for the DMO to help the entire destination be consistent, because it's always been the case in tourism that if some of us don't do it, what is it? Oh, with a high tide, all ships rise. So it's going to be that much more important, I think, that we're all doing it together and we're all on the same page. And that may take some work from the DMO to get the smaller businesses and the hippies, I like that as a suggestion, in line with everyone else.
Erin, did you have anything to say?
Everyone that's operating a small, if they have a small business, they can control their own environment. And so what they communicate about what they're doing is going to be important. But I think, that's why the CEO of that major hotel chain said that he feels a personal responsibility in this, making it safe across the journey. I think that the big brands, whether they're luxury or the 3-2-star hotels, they'll probably lead the way. People may, I don't have data to back this up, but they may trust them first because we are a kind of a litigation fearing society, and I think what we've heard from travelers is that they know Marriott doesn't want to get sued, so they will put extra caution into making sure it's safe. Then those people start traveling, see Marriott's safe, and then people start feeling more comfortable traveling, and then the smaller operators will benefit from that.
Thank you, Erin. So now finally moving into Wendy's question. Yes, resident sentiment is important, but what about destination assets sentiment such as hotels, restaurants, museums, retail, etc.? Hopefully this George Bailey moment for tourism will increase awareness of importance of destination marketing, but maybe not.
Well, we sure hope so. I think the world is seeing what it's like without hospitality and travel and tourism, and hopefully they don't like it. And from what we've seen, they don't. I mean, we've been asking if in our survey if Americans miss travel, and of course, a high number of them do.
Yeah, I have somewhat strong opinions about this. If we look at, for instance, some locality or state budgets, tourism plays a huge importance because sales taxes or things like that in that nature make a big chunk of a locality budget. And that has been the case for a lot of US destinations. And now with business being at halt, a lot of destinations are feeling that pain. And that's also driven by business not being able to open. I feel like this is going to bring more importance or more alert to what tourism is and is not. Perhaps at the locality level, it's time to really decide what's the role of tourism. Is it part of placemaking? Is it part of a primary industry? Is it part of economic development? Or is it a supporting industry? I think as an industry, we just have to speak up more about what tourism means. And during the recovery, during the pandemic, I feel like there is more need for DMOs than ever before. Anytime we ask questions to business is bleeding money. It's such a tough environment. And before we started this session, Erin and Dave were talking about numbers. Numbers have been so drastic at every level, whether it's consumer sentiment or business sentiment. And personally, I really feel that this really makes the case how businesses nowadays need DMOs more than ever. There needs to be a lot of support work. And I feel very passionate about this. There's just more and more need. So again, we're gonna switch gears. Next question is from Duark. I hope I pronounced that correctly, I apologize. We have been reading estimates of occupancy from OTAs and experts that is close to 50% of the previous record. But do you think it will rather follow 80-20 rather than equal distribution of footfalls? This means that the best will win and the average below average will close doors.
That is a great topic for discussion. I'd love to hear what everyone thinks about that.
It's it's one of those moments where right now I'm not sure that we will know the answer, and very sadly, the small mom and pop restaurants just in my neighborhood are closed, not just for now because of shelter in place, but closed for good. And it breaks my heart that part of the cultural fabric of my community is gone. So there's going to be some of that, but there's no way to know at a nationwide level how that's going to play out.
Perfect. And moving to the next question, is referring to regional differentiation from Guyana. Is there any difference by region where they live? Looking at the results from your survey, what geographic differences have you seen?
Yes, it's definitely uneven when we compare the four major regions of the U.S. that we've been looking at. The South and the Midwest we saw being the most optimistic this week, most open to travel and not feeling as strong of a personal concern about the virus or its impact on their finances. The Northeast is a different story, as you can imagine. They're far more concerned about the virus and its impact on personal finances. You know, in the Northeast, they were much more likely to say they're going to stay at staycation this summer, and also still haven't rebounded on their openness to traveling internationally.
Erin, did you see any patterns in terms of number of cases at an area or with stay-at-home orders? Was there any kind of pattern just overall looking at? Because Northeast, I think that's a very good, that was interesting, I thought, from the data.
Yeah, so just we present these findings every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. If anyone is welcome to join us. And this coming week, we're going to have a panel of travelers from states that have reopened and hear directly from traveling consumers about how that's going and what kind of travels that they've done or that they've seen. And we'll continue to study that in the actual the survey research. We also have been tracking, not exactly your question, but we've also been tracking what destinations are being most associated with coronavirus. There was a slide I shared that people are, you know, I can't remember the exact percent that are saying they're going to avoid places where the coronavirus situation got bad. And that's been interesting to see how that changes based on levels of outbreak and what people hear in the media.
Thank you. Here's an interesting question. What do you suggest a DMO do with their guide that they already published? I think it's just an excellent question.
Yeah, that is a great question. I haven't actually worked in the distribution of visitor guides since my days at the San Francisco CVB almost 20 years ago. I don't know. I think there's probably consumer understanding that the guide was published before COVID-19, if there is a cost-efficient way to communicate that so that they know that the information was, you know, developed before COVID-19 and that the destination is all working together to make sure that the health and safety of their visitors is being accounted for. I think that would be good. I mean, it's just the people want communication right now. They want to know that the current times and their health is being considered. So there's a way that you can do that and still distribute that guide that you paid to produce. I think that would be ideal. Again, I mean, I'm gonna venture to say that I think the traveling consumer is going to be understanding that, you know, you didn't have a chance to make a whole new guide in the last couple months.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I think as we've seen from our sort of industry-wide visitor guide research, we know that the visitor guide plays a really important role in the higher level inspiration phase. And so even if your destination might not be open yet and your guide might not be used for planning their trip right now because that data is not necessarily representative of the businesses that are still open right now in certain very dramatic cases. Travelers still are going to want to be inspired about the future, and your guide that is already published still has a purpose that it can fill. But I think Erin's point is right, and I want to underscore it, that there needs to be communication that, you know, use this to dream about your trip for later when we're open and when we're safe. and go to this website URL to find all of the things we're doing right now to make the destination safe for you when you're ready to visit. Like, that's the most up-to-date information is going to be so critical to go along with that inspiration message.
Thank you. And this question was from Laura, and I totally relate to that as a past DMO person. Next question is coming from Kim, and again, another good question. Do you have any data on Gen X perceptions of travel? Do you have demographics for your sample? Of course, that, yeah. Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the short answer is yes, absolutely, and then those can be shared. And then I'm just so happy someone asked about Gen X. That's my generation. And it's been really interesting to see in this survey over the 10 weeks, when this all started, Gen X got a lot of attention for being the practical generation that was trying to tell the ones on the book ends of them that they need to take the virus seriously. And we've continued to see that in our data that they've been very, very cautious. And it's funny, David, the boomers have sometimes swung back and forth between weeks. The millennials seem to constantly be the optimists, but Gen X is just plodding along very practically with their openness to travel and their concerns.
And personally, I'm really curious what Gen Z is going to do. I think they're going to redefine what travel means for us in this new normal. So we have a couple international questions, and we are getting close to our timeline. Dwarak put a really good perspective from India, and I want to make sure I share this with everyone. Thanks a lot for the opinion. In India, where I operate, most tourist accommodations are small, medium businesses run by locals or passionate travelers. As far as I spoke to my clients previously, they either would like to come back if they know the owner personally, or would go for a brand rather. And although I don't like what I'm going to type, it looks like 70-30 or more so. Hope it's wrong. So I guess those are some of the things that he's seeing in India. We are probably seeing somewhat similar patterns in the US too. Tourism is mostly small business, and the survival rates are probably going to change, how much cash they have and how they can bear the storm. But Dwarak, I hope that 70-30 number is wrong along the path, and we are going to see hopefully better numericals for that. Moving into Lauder's font question, do you have a point of view about international school trips or educational short-term international experiences exchanges? Anything on that, Erin and David?
Well, I'm just going to share that my son, I was supposed to be hosting a student from Taiwan right now. My son was supposed to have gone and lived with that student the month prior. So all my kids go to an international school, and all the exchanges have been canceled for this school year, obviously. So this is just a near and dear question for me. And what we're seeing right now is there's still a lot of fear about international travel, and still a large number of Americans saying that they're going to avoid specific international destinations. Now, that being said, again, looking to the millennials to lead the recovery, fear about traveling internationally is definitely not as strong amongst them. So now, I don't think a lot of them have school-age kids that would be going on international trips. So, that might not make a difference. And I think it's just kind of back to what we were saying about the hotel brands. That if the schools, they feel, and the parents trust that the schools are taking this seriously and don't want to get sued, then maybe that appetite will come back. And then, each week as people feel safer, that's gonna make people want to be okay sending their kids or being a student themselves and wanting to go do exchange programs. But right now, there's still, unfortunately, still a lot of fear about going internationally from Americans.
Well, Erin and David, thank you so much. Before we close, one last question. what top numbers the tourism businesses or DMOs should be looking at in the next couple months? What comes to your mind first?
I'm sorry, Ezra, I didn't catch it. Top what?
Top numbers in terms of looking at performance, looking at sentiment, residents, what a priority should be on the radar?
Well, it's just how, I mean, I have to keep saying this, like how safe people are feeling. I think that's really such a top indicator right now. And then Ezra, as you know, this has shaken everything up. So I know there's a lot of talk that the hotel performance indicator may not be the right one or the most important one going forward. Although, of course, you know, that is a very good indicator of how your local tourism industry is doing. I think there's a lot of, you know, up in the air and decisions that need to be made about destination marketing and the tourism industry overall. Ezra, I know you have to have an opinion on this.
I have lots of opinions, of course. I think we just need to go back to the basic and the pillars of our business, looking at business, resident, and the traveler, and of course the environment, and try to close the gaps. But you hit it so well with safety. That's just a changing paradigm right now that we have to deal with, and our benchmarks are going to change. It's a different paradigm, and we have to rebuild tourism, and hopefully we are going to rebuild a better world than before. But it's tough in the next year. I want to thank everyone for attending these open forums on behalf of TTRA, and especially to Erin and David for putting the time and energy to this wonderful informative session. We are looking forward to seeing you next week as well. And thank you all. Stay well and healthy. And thank you, Erin and David. This was fabulous. Take care.
Thank you. Hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.